Teachers of Reddit, what is your "this student is so dumb it's scary" story? I'm a professor grading papers now and I have a few contenders right here. This one student blatantly plagiarized in his first paper. I mean just cutting and pasting from web pages. He didn't even steal from the primary sources and they weren't even scholarly web pages. I was so surprised at how badly he plagiarized that I gave him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he didn't understand what it really was. I just gave him a 0 along with an email describing the issue in detail with some additional links for whole sites that do the FAQs really well. We met, and I explained it to him. He was abjectly apologetic and explained that he had missed the nuances before grading the final paper. Same it all over again. And I test this stuff using a free website I found just on Google and it takes like 2 minutes to check. What the duck is he thinking? Also the non-plagiarized part, it's so poorly written I don't know how he even got in, much less made it to be a junior at a selective school. The guy's is also pre-med. WTF. On a number of occasions, around 5 or 6, I have had to explain to students that you can still get pregnant even if you don't orgasm. Apparently, it's an old wives' tale in a bunch of cultures, and when I corrected them, they fought back. I had a classmate put a thermometer into the middle of a Bunsen burner to see how hot the fire was, as glass and mercury promptly exploded everywhere. I'm pretty sure I saw the teacher's soul leave her body. Never saw her look so horrified or pissed before. Classmates and I were 12. Edit. I'm English. Yes, we still use those thermometers. This happened in like 2011 to 2012. One of my 10th graders said she saw a crime being committed, bike being stolen in neighbor's yard, and she wanted to call 911 but she didn't know the number. When I was student teaching, I had one who was just on the verge of passing. Thanks to the incredible mercy of the primary teacher, all he needed to do was turn in a worksheet that he finished in class. I know that he finished it because I watched him and helped him do it. All he had to do was give it to the teacher. But, in his mind, that would mean that she had won. So he refused to turn it in. I left the school before the end of the semester, but I would bet money that he failed the class. I had a little boy, first grade, who always got 14 as his answer to every problem no matter what. On the second day of school I sat down to do 3 plus 2 with him using counters. We set out a pile of 3 and a pile of 2. I told him to count and watched in horror as he pushed the counters into a line and then counted back and forth, recounting them until he got to 14. That was the biggest number he knew. He would have just kept going on. I don't usually wear glasses when I teach, except for one day, and it was subsequently a big deal among all my 5th graders. The next day, at the start of class, I noticed a girl in the front row wearing glasses for the first time. Something seemed a little off, so I finally decided to chime in. "Emily, what's the deal with the glasses? These? I need them to see, but they don't have any lenses." She appeared befuddled and said, "They don't?" before lifting her finger up to one of the eye frames and poking herself in the eye. I teach 5th grade. I had to explain to a student walking in line. He would never walk in line correctly. Finally, after correcting him for the 1000th time, he snapped, "What do you mean? What do you mean get in line? What's the line? Why do teachers always say that?" It never occurred to me he didn't understand after being in school for years. He was the best though. One of my favorites. Kids asked me, "Are you from Detroit or some other city I forget?" I said neither. I moved here from Pennsylvania. One girl gasped and asked, "Do they have slaves there?" Back when I was teaching high school, I was giving an exam to my first year students and one of them stole the key, to the exam the second year students were taking. He was not subtle about it, either. The whole fake a sneeze, go get tissue, pick up a large piece of paper and think your skinny teenage body can conceal it angle. I should have said something. But the fact that I was so fed up with this sorta crap by that point is one of the reasons I quit teaching high school. Anyway, that's not what made it such a dumb decision. What made it dumb was when he bombed the exam. He tried to claim that I purposely misgraded his exam because I hated him, and even got his mother in on it for a parent conference. Which means his own mother was front and center for me when I pointed out how his answer form was a perfect match for a test he didn't take. Mom was not happy with him, to say the least. Though for the icing on the cake, she did ask that I let him retake the real test, and since she honestly seemed to care a lot more than many of the parents I met, and since I did admittedly feel a little guilty for not trying to prevent it in the first place, not that I admitted to that part, as a compromise we let him come after school to retry at a penalty, and in the end, he freaking aced the test. He was normally a C student or so, and if he'd just done that the first time, the weight of the exam probably would have bumped him up low B. Aesop couldn't have turned it into a better cheaters never prosper fable. Not from when I was teaching, but a buddy's classmate. HS class was discussing the number of stars in the galaxy. My buddy jokingly says 20. Kid next to him, notably not the sharpest kid I've known, goes, "Are you stupid? There's gotta be 100 of them. Maybe even 1,000. Serious as can be. Honestly not sure what's dumber, him thinking the guess of 20 was real, or him thinking that 1,000 might be too high. What's so wrong with genocide? It's just like survival of the fittest." I thought I would be teaching about plate tectonics today, ended up having to do a lesson on why the earth isn't flat. Not a student, but a kid in my physics lab today called his group mates sources of error. I'm a flight instructor. Had a student who really wasn't cut out for flying. Before each lesson his job was to do a pre-flight on the airplane and make sure everything was working. One of the items you check during the pre-flight are the flaps. Basically, they are a flap of metal that extends from the aft section of the wing and drops down into the airstream during landings. Well, he flies Cessna 172 where the wings are on top of the cockpit, above the pilot, and the flaps are situated just behind the door. Without fail, this guy opens the door, moves the switch to deploy the flaps, and turns around to run face first into the flaps he just lowered. It's funny the first, concerning the second time, and expected after the 10th time, every single lesson. I volunteered to do the book fair for my old middle school. My mom was the assistant librarian. I had a 7th grader come up to purchase a poster of a car. The price was $3. He pulled out $2 $1 bills and set it on the desk in front of me. He then pulled out a handful of change and set it on the table. He asked, "Is this enough?" I said, "Well, you need one more dollar." He then picked out 2 quarters and 2 dimes. "Now?" he asked. I said, "That's 70 cents. You need 30 more." He picked out 3 nickels and added them to the pile. "There you go," he said. I then proceeded to ask him what he thought the denominations for each coin were, and he legit did not know. I had to give him a quick lesson in the value of each coin and helped him count out $1 in change. To me, this situation is ridiculous. We will all have to deal with money throughout our lives. You have to learn to know the value of each coin and know how to add money. Kid clearly had autism, and rather low functioning at that. I was his key worker and could only get him to respond to textures or music. He was only 2, but wouldn't answer when called and would just sit vacant in the room while all of the other children got up and moved into the other room. Just not there in the here and now unless, like I said, I played a song and he'd come to life. He'd sit at the table vacant unless I put his hands into something that felt different. Water, sand etc. I told my boss that I thought he had autism and she replied, "Autism is nonsense. He's just lazy." So I continued teaching him as though he was autistic because that's the only way I could get him to learn. Fast forward and yep, he's autistic. I'm not a teacher but a classmate of a kid who wanted to be a doctor who asked, when 14, if science was necessary to be a doctor or if he could get by with religious studies. I hope he failed. Not a school teacher, but I've taught swim lessons in the past. I was once teaching the adult learn to swim class and had an incredibly dumb dude, let's call him Rusty, sign up. Rusty was a 100-pound guy with an absolute fear of water. He wouldn't even shower, but he decided that swimming lessons were gonna cure him. It was the first day, when we were just getting accustomed to the water and helping people with a phobia start to get over it. The first few people are puttering around in the shallow end, 1 meter deep, and getting a feel for the water. Some of them were immigrants from someplace very dry and had never been in a pool before. So it was quite the experience for them and things were getting loud. All of a sudden, I hear Rusty give his best bald eagle screech attempt. sprint down the deck, and launch himself into the deep end. 4 meters deep. He immediately starts drowning. No fat, no float, and is going down fast. My assistant, the lifeguard, got him holding onto the rescue tube, and pushed him to the shallow end. Still screaming and flailing, he hauled himself up the stairs and started sprinting for the deep end again and chucked himself back in. I went in after him since my assistant was still in the water and dragged him out again. He tried to do it a 3rd time, but I was able to stop him until security showed up to hold him back for his own safety. I never saw him again after that day, but I'll never know why he, an aquaphobic non-swimmer, would think jumping in the deep end was a good idea. I'm not a teacher, but I used to volunteer in my daughter's classrooms when they were in elementary school. One day while I was helping grade papers, it became quite apparent that one little girl had copied from the boy sitting next to her. Not only were the answers the same, she also had written his name on top of her paper. This happened in high school maths. Let's call him John. Teacher, so John, how do you find an average? John, kilometer. The pain in the teacher's eyes was immeasurable. Told to me by a friend, written in his words. The other day I had a student bite into a bar of deodorant. Just chomped right into it, as if it were a coconut and palm tree scented ice cream bar. This, after making like he was going to lick it and accidentally getting the taste of the deodorant and his own residual pit sweat. Half a second later he just went whole hog on it and took a chunk out of it, then spat it out. I didn't know whether to call poison control or the principal. I was a former college recruiter who used to set up a booth at low-income schools to help guide first-generation students into college. Had a high school girl come up to me and tell me she wants to be a gynecologist. So I start talking about which schools have good pre-med programs, the kind of classes she would need to take. Broaching the idea of med school, she says, hold up, a gynecologist is a doctor? I say yes. She says, well, I do not want to go to medical school. I just want a job where I can look at V's all day. We ended up talking about possibly cosmetology school or esthetician school. Also, she was not kidding. I got many dumb questions like this. When you don't know, you don't know. Okay, so I used to be a teacher, and then I went into teacher education. So I supervised student teachers in the field, meaning I'd go out and observe them teaching their classes. As an observer, one's job is only to observe, not to offer comments during the observation. So you literally say nothing. It was a 5th grade social studies class and they were discussing Ben Franklin. One student asked what number president was he, and the teacher was like, I don't know, followed by like a 10-15 minute debate in the class and with the teacher about which number president he was, comma. Obviously the 5th graders aren't so dumb it's scary, but thank goodness the student teacher finally decided to use the Google to answer their question. I've had kids turn in papers that were clearly plagiarized, but one kid didn't bother to change the font color on his paper. It was a pretty clear case. I had another who was supposed to be researching a technological innovation, the history and impacts of it. One kid chose the telephone. His paper was not only obviously plagiarized, but it was literally an ad for telephones.com. The kid had clearly not even bothered to do anything other than just go to telephones.com and copy and paste. But my all-time favorite is the kid who stopped me and said, "Is Chicago a city or a country?" I told him it was a city. He considered that for a minute and then said, "Wait, then what's a state?" In my design class, I had this girl who had placed a garage beside the house, but couldn't, for the life of God, figure out why her 90 cm by 200 cm door was not appropriate for a car to enter through. Same girl planned a small space for children in a library. Said space was only 1.5 meters high, and no matter what the teacher said, she kept going back to, but this space is for children. They are not tall, but they will suffocate, but it is a space for children. Herder, 1st grade, girl crying. Turned around to see a girl with her shoe off barefoot hiding something in one hand with a pair of scissors in the other. I asked her what the matter was. She told me that she had half of a sock, and opened her hand to clearly show a poorly cut up sock. I asked her why she cut her sock up and she said she didn't realize it would cut the sock. Great thinking, kiddo. Have you never heard the Ballad of Kevin? When I was a professor, I had a student submit a paper she clearly hadn't written. I called her out on it and she complained by email to me and CC'd the dean of the school. Her argument was that it was hers because she had paid her own money to have it written. Teaching grade 10 history, I cracked a bad joke one day about how the Cold War happened every winter for about 50 years. One of the questions on the test was to list 8-10 important facts about the Cold War. Guess what fact appeared in several students' responses to that question? Not a teacher. This one moron currently in my master's program makes me question if I'm actually in a mental institution. How someone like him managed to get into what is generally considered a top-tier program is beyond understanding. From contributing zero to group projects, to bring an active detriment to group effort, it seems like he is trying to be difficult. His final, ready to be submitted portion of one class's big final project had 30+ spelling errors, including but not limited to revenue, developed, aces instead of acres. This one repeated 6 times. Constraints instead of constraints. Pencils. School. Excel. Height instead of height. It goes on and on. This was just the errors in one project in one class. I happened to have him in all 3 classes and I happened to have him in all 3 group projects. In one group, we collectively sent him 33 emails and text messages with highlights, bullet points, step-by-step corrections, and he completely ignored them all, only to blow up at us in a group meeting about how we were all bullying him and he didn't understand what he was doing wrong. He would argue with us about whether he was right or not, whether his abysmal work needed to be edited or not. He never spell checked a damn thing. He never reviewed his own work once. He is the biggest piece of it mentally challenged student I have ever met. Yet somehow he got into this program. I hate this dumb duck. Not a teacher, but so dumb it's scary, makes me always think of the Kevin to end all Kevins. Had a test on the 3 states of matter. Student response. First name equals liquid. Last name equals gas. That's what we called her the remainder of the year. I taught a freshman English class and an 18-year-old wrote a persuasive essay arguing that homicide is a good way to keep population down. Not a teacher myself, but my teacher told us this story. I should mention that I live in Israel and OFC the lessons are in Hebrew, so we had an essay we had to write in English about people who influenced on our lives. And there was one student who used a lot of Google Translate. He probably just ran the whole text through it. Our teacher's last name is Ben Avraham. And yes, he ran it through the translator, so he called her son of Abraham. We had been watching Excalibur the movie in class, high school, for 2 consecutive days, and with about 20 minutes left in the movie a girl raises her hand and deadass asks, "Wait, is Excalibur the sword?" And most of the class slow turned to look at this itch. Not a teacher, but a classmate of mine. We were in 8th grade world geography class. Teacher, what language do people in Mexico speak? He was asking sarcastically. Student, Mexican. Teacher damn near quit right then and there. Side note, the student grew up and was arrested for being a pedophile to his own daughter. He was so dumb it was scary. Small hick towns are something. I had an 8th grade girl worry that if she can't find a boyfriend she will have to find one on The Bachelor. She would have been 16 within those 2 years. She later asked me to tell her crush in another class that she loved him deeply. Nope. Not a teacher but a student. I was in a geology class and the teacher was talking about lava and this one kid stops the teacher to ask, "Does lava burn? Like would anything bad happen if I put my finger in it?" Naturally the teacher and the rest of us assumed he was joking and the teacher just kinda laughed. The kid then says that he's actually serious. The teacher just kinda looks at him like WTF and he says yes and carries on not wanting to waste time. I was still convinced the kid was joking, so I asked him after class if was just joking and trying to duck with the teacher when he said he was serious. He then tells me that he really was serious. That's not the first time he's said something that dumb, so I don't find it very hard to believe that he might have been serious. Cut the internet by kinking the cable, like a hose. Why am I reading this when I'm literally about to give my math professor something to post about on here when I take my final in the morning? Edit. I took the test. It was horrible. Student got access to my master's thesis and lifted a section out verbatim and turned it into me as their own work. I'm a student, not a teacher, but we were in prep, supervised study, and a student, year 9/3 RD form / 13-year-old, asked a teacher for help in his algebra work. Okay, no big deal. The teacher starts breaking it down. So you do the same to one side as the other, said the teacher. The kid was still confused, so the teacher started to break it down even more. The kid was still confused. The teacher gave up and basically fed him the answers. So the teacher went on, so here. Yes, this bit. Yes, 6a grave to, so what is 6a grave 2 inches? Now I quote directly from the student, how do you work out 6a grave 2? Full stop. Yes, that is correct, people. This 13-year-old did not know basic division. And it's not like this is a bad school. The fees for boarders are you acute 40,000 per year ducking. Heck, James Dyson went to the same school as this dimwit. Like seriously, how the duck did he pass the entrance exam? I work in IT at schools, so not a teacher. My favorite one is kids bringing their laptop in complaining the internet doesn't work. Turns out they have all but ripped off the top cover and it is held together with just a cable. I show them all the torn cables and ask if they could guess why their laptop doesn't work properly. This has been multiple kids between multiple schools. 11th grader spelled his last name wrong. Like multiple letters wrong. I literally sat and stared completely dumbfounded for a few minutes. Had some students come up to me the other day to ask if they could go see a teacher during their lunch break. I asked why, and one of them said, "We're in trouble because we accidentally made fun of someone with optimism." I then asked her to repeat herself, hoping she would correct herself, but said optimism instead of autism again. I let them go see that teacher, because I did not have time to think about how to approach that conversation. I'm not a teacher. This was in my 11th grade world history class. We were going over World War II at the time, when this girl raised her hand and asked completely serious, "Wait, England isn't a state in the US?" The teacher just looked at her in shock while the rest of the class burst into laughter. I'm sure she was serious because she got really embarrassed, and after class I heard her ask her friends at lunch if they knew about England. They also started laughing at her too.